Hi everyone, it's me again, and Squish Gang is present. And today we're going to be talking about the recent influx of mainstream media coverage on YouTube allegations and kind of the drama reporting as it contrasts from mainstream media to kind of YouTube and new media and the consensus on the platform and all that kind of stuff. And we're going to do so through the lens of critical discourse analysis. Critical discourse analysis is analyzing the text, but also the text in the way that it exists in the sphere in which it's written. So in this case, Cosmopolitan as a mainstream media magazine that's very popular, or Vanity Fair and it being very popular, a mainstream media magazine, and kind of where it aligns with the messaging throughout. First, links, sources, ways to support the channel, including Patreon and YouTube memberships down below, along with any affiliate links to the makeup on my face, as well as an email to suggest content or sponsor me. I'm just kidding, but kind of not. And anything else that you need, everything will be down below. 3 parts of the video today. Part 1, we're going to talk about the Cosmopolitan James Charles article. Part 2, the Vanity Fair and Colleen Ballinger. Those will both be arguments presented via close reading. And then Part 3 will just be a brief discussion on kind of rhetoric and the process of multimedia. Now, I also want to add that I'm not reading the full articles because I feel like that's been done to death. I've actually had a hard time recently watching commentary because I just kind of feel like everybody's saying the same thing all the time. So because of that, I don't feel like I need to say anything in regards to like every single piece. So I'm going to use my expertise as it aligns with actually working on something. So I've done it more of an essay form where I explain something, then I have a quote to support my claims, etc. So let's get right into the news because it is mainstream media. Part 1, Cosmopolitan and James Charles. If you're not living under a rock or you touch grass, your feed has not been flooded with the same things as mine. All I've been seeing is this focus on this particular article that has been written about James Charles, which is called James Charles Would Like to Be Uncancelled, Please, with the author Gabrielle Bluestone, who attempts to push this kind of agenda that we should be forgiving James Charles. Here, I want to utilize my silly little piece of paper on my wall up there and kind of work with what little I remember about article writing and news journalism analysis, etc. So what we're going to start with is unpacking what I consider to be the main thesis of this article, which states, but it's also Charles himself, a warrior, acceptably contrite, but still a little extra Charles. This very interview is to be a trial balloon. Its reception, the answer to the question, both of us, and maybe you too, if what auto-populates in Google search can be believed, are here to ask, is James Charles still cancelled? So the thesis is, in this case, is attempting to do many different things at once. For one, it begins by placing stakes on the reader, where it attempts to explain this kind of why now? Why are we bringing this up now? Is it still relevant? Was it ever relevant? Thus kind of putting you in a place of confusion. Then it is attempting to form community between the author, Gabrielle Bluestone, the reader, yourself, and James Charles, saying, me as the author here are bringing forth a humanistic approach to the James Charles situation. And in that, James Charles is going to share his truth. And then you as the reader have the third role, which is to decipher and make a decision for yourself. And it also is challenging kind of in a bit of a gaslighting way, interestingly enough. I know internet terms, but like, is placing doubt on how much you actually remember about it based on the framing here. And I would say to the dismay of Gabrielle Bluestone that people actually remember far more about this than I think she realizes. Speaking against James Charles is more prevalent than speaking with James Charles, and people have way more ammunition in this narrative than I think Gabrielle Bluestone thought we would. So then the author attempts to utilize and take advantage of the gaps between mainstream media and social media. Someone older in my class today actually said, like, I feel like I used to be able to just see New York Times and trust it, right? So Cosmopolitan is also going to be playing on that based on their reputation as a magazine. In this, Gabrielle Bluestone goes off the notion that online discourse tends to be frivolous and meaningless in the grand scheme of like the world that we live in, and is bringing up this sort of appeal to authority fallacy regarding like agencies in LA that allow James Charles to go to events, saying that these people have way more authority and know so much more than the people who discuss James Charles online. In this, Gabrielle writes, after all, would a still ousted person be allowed to pose for red carpet cameras at the People's Choice Awards or chat amicably with paparazzi while out about in Hollywood? Would a still banished person have hundreds of thousands of fans enthusiastically engaged with his YouTube beauty tutorials? Would a truly exiled person be 24 years old, living in a reportedly $7 million farmhouse that looks like a cross between the homes featured in the later seasons of Vanderpump Rules, or any season or iteration of the Kardashians? I don't care about the Kardashians' house. So I'm not at all ignoring the comment about James getting engagement with the video. This is something that I'm trying to focus on the contrary. And here brings forth this narrative of like cancel culture doesn't exist and cancel culture doesn't work. Which I feel like if you say cancel culture to a boomer, their heart explodes. They think that like someone breathes the word cancel culture and like someone like played Minecraft with their mom in front of them. You know what I mean? And for those of you who are as chronically online as me, know what that means. What I see this as, and this happens a lot in the Vanity Fair article, this is something that a lot of people with a hidden agenda tend to do when they're writing allegedly in Minecraft. They will align their position with something that is commonly decided, or they will aim the opposition of their position to something that is typically considered frivolous. Okay, so this is very common, but for some reason, something that people don't notice. I'm literally in an intensive philosophy class right now, and I had a 15-minute argument with my professor because we were given something that was exceedingly obviously aligned to be manipulated, where it was like the option that seemed to be the correct option was associated with the least professional and worst, and someone with the worst reputation out of everyone else in the room, so that you would be dissuaded from picking it. And then I said, well, this is obviously manipulated. And then they were like, yeah, so it wouldn't be obvious. And I'm like, well, an argument should stand on its own as opposed to being built off its opposition. This is the same structure that people like this are using. Their argument lacks foundation to such an extent that the only possible option is to foundationally deconstruct those that oppose them. And I think what Gabrielle Bluestone is doing is enacting the buzzword of cancel culture to kind of deconstruct any validity in online discourse by people such as myself, who are just kind of like talking on YouTube. Bluestone is constructing a house of cards of online criticism and is to build up the interview position to then kind of blow over this cancellation. The article continues in a way in which I could possibly contribute to perhaps maybe bad writing practice, but this is because it begins in a way that implies that the reader has agency and that it's like we're making this decision all together. We're thinking about this critically all together, but then just like throws that away and shifts entirely into I'm telling you what to believe by stating, neither of us know how it will go due to the murky nature of cancel culture and its crisscrossing tripwires of implied and loosely enforced rules. And because of a hungry and fickle internet that doles out forgiveness, or maybe just forgetfulness in parentheses, seemingly at whim, it's a landscape, hellscape some would say, in which all comebacks are tentative, where the conversation around an offense ends up obscuring the offense itself. When I polled friends and colleagues about Charles the run-up to this day, the general consensus was that he had done something bad, but no one knows clearly exactly what. So this excerpt that I just read kind of demands a sort of consistency in the discourse. However, the basis of this inconsistency is fallacious. It is based on something that is called the fallacy of argument of small numbers. There are other names that's actually not the name that I learned it with, but I cannot remember what the number was, or the actual name that I knew from before. A mix of fallacy of small numbers with a little bit of appeal opinion kind of mixed in, like a fun little like potage of dégueulasse nature. But yeah, dégueulasse is disgusting, but you know, Quebecois core. Regardless, I'm going to explain what I mean by this like fallacy of small numbers and stuff, okay? Regarding the sample size, Bluestone aims to use the opinion of her friends to imply the notion of that there are people who actually like touch grass and like go outside and aren't like super chronically online, that they're like smart enough to not be worrying themselves about these things. This is to build up Gabrielle's point throughout the article through the appeal of opinion to its foundation, right? Weirdly enough, I had a feeling that she was an attorney prior to looking into her bio at all, which ended up being what she did as her like main job. And it's because the way that she builds foundations that are seemingly unrelated to her goal and then uses those kind of bizarre, almost red herring foundations to change the direction out of nowhere and leave the reader questioning their own predisposed ideologies. It's really giving like, when did you stop beating your wife type of questions, which I said that in class too, and that was a whole other thing. But in this concept of like, all of a sudden you're defending yourself and you think you've stated your own opinion, and then you just slightly change the subject of the question, and then it will throw everything off the rails. This article, I found, in my opinion, kind of severs James from responsibility for his actions, which I want you to note, and this is something in the Vanity Fair article. This is something that people do. I noticed when the person is actually guilty, hypothetically, allegedly in Minecraft, because it is trying to convince us that James is a victim of his environment, almost as if what he literally admitted on video didn't actually happen. Focus on how Bluestone describes the makeup community and her interpretation of it in the following excerpt. In a corner of the internet known for constant sniping, backstabbing, and hopelessly convoluted rivalries, the same lack of guile and perma-logged-on status that drew viewers to Charles also made him a magnet for drama. There he was, posting regular apologies for things like insensitive tweets about Africa and Ebola, or for asking Shawn Mendes to juggle me like that during an IG livestream in which Shawn Mendes was literally juggling. So it's like you're trying to veer away from the whole point here, right? Again, notice the term perma-logged-on status. Would you not think that if James Charles was truly not guilty of what happened and was actually deserving of forgiveness, like everything was just off the rails, that the actual nature of the allegations would be unpacked rather than denouncing those who consumed content relating to the allegations? If I didn't murder somebody, I should be able to just prove I didn't murder somebody. I shouldn't have to defame those that said I murdered. You see what I'm saying? This happens a lot more during the article, and I'll bring in more excerpts, such as, in the end, substantiated or not, multiple media reports indicated that at least 15 boys and men had accused Charles of inappropriate behavior. Charles says now the breadth of the allegations, the source of where the list came from was not doing any sort of research, no fact-checking. Shout out to Deaf Noodles for ruining everything. Some of the screenshots depicted consensual conversations between adults, he says. Others were completely fake and never happened. This again is set to discredit any allegations against James Charles. And kind of this concept that those who just believed in any of the things coming out were sheep in a way because the allegations that were spread were false, only some of them. This is also, again, under the idea, like, here's the thing. Based on my reputation, if it came out that I was asking minor boys for armpit pics, I think there'd be some sense of disbelief, unless there was proof provided thoroughly. There's no acknowledgement on the fact that people were believing this because based on James Charles's past actions, this was plausible in the first place. You see what I'm saying? Like, people believed it on face value because 2 other times he literally admitted to them on video. That's why people were willing to believe it. However, I also pose this question to the author, who is an attorney. Was one inappropriate and sexual in nature conversation with a minor not already too many? Like, I feel like what we're doing is focusing on the opposite of what actually matters. Whether it's 2 boys or 5 or 10 or 50, it's wrong as soon as it happens once. And I feel like I'm in like cuckoo crazy bananas land for like understanding that as the focus as opposed to like fighting on semantics. Bluestone then begins to talk about those who are accusing James of these things, saying that one wished for payment and one did not comment when payment was not provided. This is to discredit people who are now, 18 at 19 years old at the oldest? There is no consideration for those who were not going to at least take payment, the potential harassment that they would face if they were going to comment in this article. And given the framing, the interview would pose quite literally zero benefit to them and rather potentially put them in danger of harassment online. So of course you want to be cut a check. Me too. Hello. Like if I'm going to talk in like a puff piece against someone who I think has harmed me, you're going to cut me a check. I can't believe these kids that would have had nothing going for them and this would have only been a negative experience for them didn't want any form of compensation. Or how dare they want any form of compensation? It's like, so I have the following excerpt again. I think I've always been somebody who's been able to cope. Then I skip a bunch because it's stupid. It was really scary because my coping mechanisms weren't coping. It was the first time that I was like, oh, F word, I actually don't know what to do here. I eventually got to a point where I was like, this is not healthy. This is not good. This is getting into a really dark place. The fallout became deeply personal when his younger brother, who works as a model in New York City, stopped talking to him because of the allegations. It has now been 2 years since they last spoke. This quote poses one of, and I think potentially the only concrete point in this article. If James were innocent, and in reality none of this happened, and we were just making an error, and he was just being cringe, that wouldn't constitute Ian not talking to him. Especially because Ian was somebody who was very close to James and involved heavily with his channel. So if this never happened, why doesn't he talk to him? Because also, notice how he says 2 years. So if the 2019 stuff wasn't resolved, let's say Ian was just believing anything, and even 2019 he wasn't talking to him, that would be 4 years. So this is only from the 2021 allegations, not the ones that were quote unquote proven false from Via Drum again, but even then, upon revisiting, people are like, oh wait, maybe there was a lot of honesty in that in the first place. Then there's another quote that says, his intention was never to prey on minors, he says. He tried to explain all of this in holding myself accountable, but it just didn't come across right, he reflects. I've been effed over by men so many different times. At this point, I just want an effing boyfriend. Any hoozle doodles, I want to call back a video I put out recently where I criticized Papa Gut's initial approach to the Colleen Ballinger situation, where I kept calling back that Papa Gut was doing this weird thing where he was separating the result of the action from the intention. Kept essentially saying that, like, oh, we're just being too mean to Colleen because it wasn't her intention. This article aims to do the exact same thing. So this just further proves my point that I was right initially, that, like, it's a stupid way of approaching things. And I feel like, just like with Colleen, we got to keep the same energy. Does anyone remember that era of Rich Lux? Keep the same energy. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. I used to have a clip of it like way long ago, but I don't have it anymore. But I'm going to look around for keep the same energy, and I hope I can find it somewhere. In our own messy, imperfect way, maybe we're starting to calibrate our responses to the severity of an offender's offense. Maybe we've arrived at the point where we're doing out appropriate levels of social censure? Or maybe we're just tired of keeping score and ready to succumb to the path of least resistance, letting our feeds figure it out for us. That is essentially where the article ends, as far as anything notable for me. And like I said, I feel like it just wraps it up as this like chronically online guilt trip. It only gets worse as I move on to the Vanity Fair article about Colleen Ballinger. I broke these articles down over like multiple hours. So part 2, Vanity Fair and Colleen Ballinger. In this section, I want to do another callback to the video I made on Papa Gut. This time, I'm eating my words. Because I said that calling those covering this opportunistic was stupid because I said also mainstream media is getting involved, and usually with internet stuff, they're not kind of risking something that could be proven false. And that like they wouldn't be like clout chasing and opportunistic in the same way that social media influencer would be. No, we're all just reactionary opportunists. I would like that quoted Papa Gut for the Rolling Stone article. Please call Rolling Stone a bunch of opportunists that never cared about Adam McIntyre in the first place because they're just a bunch of drama channels that make videos every time Trisha Paytas farts. This appears to be somewhat demonstrably incorrect. Obviously, there are some articles that are not like this, but specifically due to the nature of this article, I am eating my foot. Or my sock. What's that saying? I don't remember. But I also in that video brought forward this notion that when you're purposely contrarian for the sake of capitalizing on limited conversations that are competing with you, I'm saying that that's also true. So I'm like 2 for 3. That's like not the worst. Hello. I was so enthralled with sass by this point that I forgot to literally mention the name of the article that I was talking about. So the title of the article is How the Miranda Singh / Colleen Ballinger Scandal Went Off the Rails. Everything you need to know about the drama tearing YouTube apart by Andrew Quintana, published July 19th, 2023. This article says at the bottom that it's been updated, meaning that it's supposedly up to date as of when I was reading this. And now I'm going to frame it with the following excerpt. However, this is the thesis analysis again. However inappropriate her alleged behavior was, the article clarified that no sexual crime had been committed and that no evidence review even hinted at the possibility that Ballinger had intended to start a sexual relationship with a child. This is in reference to the Rolling Stone article. You can hear squeaking. My boyfriend's playing with Gus. Since the publishing of the Rolling Stone article, screenshots have surfaced of Colleen Ballinger literally sending Trisha Paytas' punani to kids. Naked pictures of Trisha Paytas that were behind a paywall to children. This is like double illegal. Copyright law, and then also, obviously, and foremost important, sending naked images to children. Not only were there screenshots, okay, because he tries to do it based off he tries to discredit the screenshot. Trisha Paytas made a video discussing it and what happened to her, and said that she confronted Colleen in the video and sent her pictures, and Colleen said some of it was a lie, but she also said some of it was out of context. Her claiming that it was out of context means that the screenshots weren't fake. The messages were there, but there was parts missing. As soon as Trisha Paytas' boobs have gone to Adam McIntyre, the game's over. That's where it should have ended. So this means that either the claim of the article being up to date is false, or that our friend Andrew does not consider distribution of P-word, of corn, to minors as a sexual crime or establishing a sexual relationship, because there's no other option there. This article does mention this instance, but then parallels it with the debunked claim. The debunked claim is supported by Colleen's lawyer, but not the rest of it. This is the same thing I was talking about earlier, aligning your goal with a weak opponent premise, shoving the important thing in the middle so you kind of don't see it. Andrew writes the following. In the ensuing weeks, Ballinger would be accused of everything from performing a Beyonce song in blackface as Miranda sings to texting a sex worker's nude photo to a minor. Ballinger's legal team has denied she performed in blackface, saying that she was wearing green face paint prior to the cover song of Wicked. Not denied that the images were sent, denied that the paint on her face wasn't green. Okay, who cares? The fuck? When you're looking at something through the lens of critical discourse analysis, okay, it involves not only looking at something in like the way that the text is positioned, but also looking at how it is aligned. Aligning unsubstantiated claims to some of the most scathing claims with a very specifically worded legal response trickling through there, in my professional opinion, is done to universally instill doubt upon all claims presented in the same space as it. Now, notice how I said my professional opinion. Yes, yes, yes. To all the people that think I'm better, that they say I think I'm better than everyone because I went to school, we're bringing it up again. Now, Andrew Quintana, we're reading his bio. It says the following. Andrew Quintana graduated from the Bennington Writing Seminars in 2023 with a degree in creative nonfiction. His work appeared in Vanity Fair. He is an educator and aspiring personal essayist who resides in Los Angeles with his husband and schnauzer Keats. Andrew and I are the same age. I'm 23. I just turned 23, like a month ago exactly from filming this. We have somewhat similar backgrounds, even have a dog. I'll put in a picture of Gus. Oh, yes. So I have a little bit more post-secondary experience than Andrew, because I also have a 2-year college diploma in pure applied science with like calculus and all that kind of stuff. Like in the sense of like, that's what I did. I did a lot of math classes and stuff. But I also have an honors. My degree name is always so long that I have to write it down. An honors undergraduate in English literature and rhetoric with a minor in philosophy, with a focus and 46-page research paper on scientific literature and communication. I also am 1 semester out from finishing a master's in secondary English language arts education, which is what he's studying right now. If his education is substantial enough to make these claims, what I did is I listed everything to try to say that my education should be enough to unpack it. Andrew then is moving on in the article by establishing how he feels about Adam McIntyre, saying the following. This is referring to the video in 2020 that was called Colleen Ballinger Stop Lying. And it says, in it, McIntyre told several seemingly unrelated stories. One recounted the time Ballinger sent him lingerie in the mail. In his mother's horror, the lingerie was new and unworn, and Ballinger has since apologized for sending it. Another was intended to debunk the rumor that he was secretly behind some anti-Miranda Sings social media accounts that Ballinger had gotten wind of. A third concerned the fallout of a tweet that Ballinger allowed McIntyre to post, as Miranda Sings, from the character's Twitter account. That led him to posting on her behalf again. He'd been considered her social media intern, he said, with hopes of being employed by her one day in that capacity. Ballinger says he only had access to her account for one day, and that, if all went well, she planned to hire him formally. The tweet in question was seized upon queerbaiting in Miranda's fandom. She came out as a mega trained fan and led to intense backlash. There is no reason that reasonably that I could figure out that describes what made these claims unrelated stories. The title of the video, girl, was Colleen Ballinger, stop lying. Let's put our brain cells together. The video consists of anecdotes, often backed up by screenshots that you credit to being backed up by screenshots later, that outlines times where Colleen lied. What feels unrelated to me is Andrew just tossing that in unsubstantiated. Citation needed a lot of times. He backs up the inappropriate dependency later in the article too, like Colleen Ballinger's inappropriate dependency on minor fans as like how she's known for bonding with her fan base. There is a clear disconnect in the narrative that Andrew is pushing through this article. He states that Ballinger in 2020 accurately painted her community as a place for children to congregate, then pairs that excerpt with an unrelated quote talking about death threats from the 2023 video, Hi, where she claimed the community is not for kids by saying that it's PG-13, except also to everyone's cognitive dissonance or something, maybe. Who said 13-year-olds aren't kids? Like, that's always weirded me out, even from the jump. He writes, Ballinger painted a seemingly accurate portrait of the Miranda Saints community, a silly place for kids like McIntyre to belong, looking up to an increasingly famous and powerful public figure. I'm not a monster, I'm not a groomer, and I do not deserve to die, Ballinger said in the video, alluding to the possibility that she'd received death threats. Also, I'm not going to check the transcript again. I feel like that was not the way that she said it. Andrew then isolates the grooming claims to only specifically Adam McIntyre, given that he blows off the many claims, screenshots, interviews, and statements from others such as Johnny, Becky, and Oliver as just like, and others. Like, just doesn't even care. And I think this is going off of almost like a clout chasing off of the fact that Adam is the only one with a prominent social media presence. Here is also where Andrew goes off onto one of the most logically weak and seemingly completely unrelated points in the article and says, the substance of Ballinger's alleged grooming has not gone beyond what McIntyre has described in his videos, or what few other fans allege thereafter. That's like the blowing off. Even though some of the things that they alleged were like Colleen using scenes in her shows to sexualize children, Colleen Ballinger's brother asking for like inflation pregnancy pics allegedly, plus like her being allegedly abusive on tour, plus XYZ other things that are also incredibly serious, even if we completely remove Adam from the equation. It has not been interrogated by media outlets reporting on the controversy either. This is again negating the fact that Rolling Stones and Huffington Post said they confirmed things down to the phone numbers. HuffPost's published allegations of grooming flexibly employ the term in a fashion not unlike how it is weaponized in far right-wing circles against LGBTQ people. No quote provided, no actual formal evidence provided, no parallel provided, just thrown. Nah, I don't like that opinion. So it's actually anti-gay. The described behavior does not approach the sexual exploitation or abuse the actual definition of grooming indicates. What's the actual definition of grooming? What's the definition that they use? How does it align? And what does the LGBTQIA plus community have to do with shit? I usually, when people are like this, I say read a book, but like he's obviously read books because he had to like study something or whatever. So like read better books, maybe have some humanity, think. I also wanted to add that this is not substantial, like nothing is substantiated here, and just moves in this like feeble attempt to make the allegation seem flagrant based on a super weak premise and using a scapegoat of right-wing media to do so. Andrew also revisits the sending of Trisha Paytas's booby pics, claiming that only texts were posted, again ignoring that Trisha literally talked about it in a video and said she confronted Colleen in the video, which I presume I've already put the clip in. But if I for some reason forgot, I will do it now.
And so I need to nip this in the bud that I do not condone at all unsolicited nudes, sending unsolicited nudes to anyone of anybody, sex worker or not. I think using someone's nudes as a way to hurt them, make fun of them, make light of them, be mean is the lowest form of human, the lowest form of intelligence. I think that's so inhumane. I think that's so disgusting for anyone. Last night, the text messages were shown, and it's very clearly from Colleen to a fan. Has over 500,000 views on Twitter that I'm not embarrassed by. I'm embarrassed for her. I try to take myself out of these equations when I'm feeling triggered, and if I were to look at it as it happening to someone else, I wouldn't be humiliated for the person in the photos. I'd be humiliated for the person who sent them. Although it can be humiliating for the person in the photos as well. And it somewhat is embarrassing. I get made fun of all the time for my body, my nudes, even under this person's posts. While I'm thankful, he posted them so I could see that this is real. It's hearing all that horrible stuff underneath the photo, like about my body just being messed up or disgusting. And it's a lot. Yes, I'm a sex worker, and yes, I chose this job, and yes, I make money doing it. But it never feels good to have someone just like make fun of your naked body. It's just a really vulnerable thing.
The article finishes with Andrew essentially saying that Adam just did this for clout and attention, and this is just cancel culture being so evil. Cancel culture, blah, blah, blah. Oh my god. Every time someone says cancel culture, a puppy dies. Like, there's just no way that y'all can keep throwing this shit around instead of actually making a logically, like, sound argument. Girl, it's like, it's also because I do, like, edits, like, freelance edits and stuff for people. In like many different contexts, like, you know, personal writing context, academic writing context, stuff like that. So it's like the way that, like, if I was given this, I would have just like ripped it apart. And like Vanity Fair's like, nah, this is slay. We're gonna publish this. I'm just like, girl. Okay, part 3, we're gonna make this short because I've been talking for a long time. Part 3, discussion of the rhetoric and the process of traditional media. Mainstream media presents a certain ethos with itself. And we cannot deny that this ethos is ingrained in companies like Vanity Fair, Cosmopolitan, especially because they tend to have a bit more of a vetting process than just like someone putting their thoughts out on social media. Because regardless of how smart I want to pretend that I am, I've never once said I'm a genius, by the way, please don't come for me. Like, nobody vets this. Nobody fact checks this before it goes out. Like, I fact checked myself, but nobody's like double checking me. I also just don't have the time to like have editors and stuff, but like, or don't have like the ability to do so, I mean. So it's like, there is no actual vetting. And I have to admit that, right? This is like self-made. In this, mainstream media does have goals to create as much buzz as possible in the same way that social media does. Which this is prevalent in that it works in just me responding to this article, as well as the many clicks that have come on from other videos. I'm going to read an excerpt from this book, Veils of Distortion, that kind of describes the phenomenon of, like, I guess the closest thing to clout chasing that exists in mainstream media. In 2012, a CBC News reporter, Kelly Crow, wrote an article for the CBC's online health blog entitled, "Is It New? It's News, but Is It True?" Her piece looked at the problems involved with reporting the findings of scientific and medical studies in the news. She cited numbers of academics who suggested that much coverage of scientific studies by newspapers is not only flawed, but involves research that ends up being refuted or attenuated over time. Journalists love to report the studies that are the initial finding stages, research that claims to be the first time anyone has discovered something, because there is newsworthiness in their novelty. But first ever discoveries are also extremely vulnerable to becoming undermined by subsequent research. When that happens, the news media often doesn't go back and inform their audience about the change, assuming that they even hear about it. There is increasing concern that in modern research, false findings may be the majority or even the vast majority of published research claims, says the epidemiologist that Crow quotes. The CBC reporter goes on to suggest that journalists, though blameworthy for this tendency, are aided and abetted by the scientists whose studies they cite. She writes that conclusion sections in scientific abstracts can sometimes be spun or overstated in an attempt to garner attention from prestigious academic journals and media who uncritically take their bait. Crow ends her piece by stressing that there is an incompatibility between the purposes and processes of news and science. Now, I understand, again, that this is related to scientific study, but again, that's besides the point, because the main thing we need to focus on here is how unsubstantiated research that can be made upon the first initial seeing of something, the mainstream media does not have an accountability to itself to revisit. Even though, which is strange, because on YouTube, if you report on something and then it changes, you bet your tuckus, or you bet your booty that the comments are going to come for your ass. Like, and just fully drag you for not coming back to it and claiming that what you said is wrong. So there's even, I would say, a lot of the time, a more of an accountability cycle in the modern new media than the mainstream media. I'm just saying that there's an importance of analyzing news media as well as social media and all that kind of stuff for this exact reason. And it's proven by journalists such as Gabrielle Bluestone and Andrew Quintana that this is necessary for trustworthy media as well. To conclude, maybe they should hire me because I'm pretty good at being right and I like money. I would not write a piece like this for any amount of money. Trust me. I've been asked to do stuff for way too much money before, like writing people's papers for them and stuff, and I won't do it because I have like a conscience. Anyways, links, sources, ways to support the channel, including Patreon, Amazon, YouTube memberships, all that kind of stuff, all down below, including an email to suggest longer form content for those who are interested. And yeah, I hope to see you all soon. And I have no idea when this video goes up, but you know, I'll see you around. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye!
Yoshi's not the only thing to scream. After 5 years in development, Yoshi gets fucking stoned in his apartment and enjoys his own company is coming to Nintendo Switch.